Gunda's Games! Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the third installment of my handy-dandy guide to Season 4. If you missed the other two so far, bam, here you go. As always, I am Gendokashi, and today I will be covering the changes to the Masteries. That's just the Masteries, by the way. I know in earlier videos I said I wanted to cover runes and summoner spells here too, but as far as I know, those aren't actually live yet, other than Smite being on a 40-second cooldown. So, if I can, I'll do that later. For now, though, let's talk Masteries. But in a way, let's still talk about Summoner spells, for you see, all three of the Summoner spell Masteries have been removed. So no more bonus gold from Smite, no more bonus AD and AP from Ignite, no shorter cooldown for Flash. So while you might miss these, no one else gets them either, and it pretty much frees up one or two Mastery slots that were otherwise a requirement for most. Generally, there's been a culling of Masteries. There's still some new, even exciting options, but there are in total 15 fewer points available among the trees. Their philosophy concerning Masteries this season has flipped slightly. Where last year they wanted early tier Masteries to help with the late game and grant early game bonuses if you invest in the tree, this year they want to give you early game bonuses early and let a fully filled tree define your role throughout the game. So let's begin the offense tree with some buffs. Both Fury and Sorcery have been improved, totaling 5% each instead of 4%. While I'm glad of the buffs honestly, I'm more grateful that I can get even numbers now. No more 39% cooldown reduction. Butcher has been reduced, so you can only get the first point of what we had before, but that 1 point is better, now applying to certain spells in addition to basic attacks. Also on Tier 1, we have Double-Edged Sword. It's strange, but potentially powerful. Just be wary of the extra damage taken. Personally, I'd consider this most on a melee bruiser who won't worry about the extra 1%. AD carries are already so squishy that this might push them over the edge. On Tier 2, Deadliness and Blast have been renamed Brute Force and Mental Force, and they've been buffed. The total damage you can get is less, but there's only 3 points, and each one is stronger than it was last year. We also get another new option in the form of Exposed Weakness. This one's unusual as it requires teamwork. I wonder if it'll stack at all, as that will determine how many players on a team can or should take it. Weapon Expertise and Arcane Knowledge have been removed from Tier 3 and replaced with some flat damage bonuses. I did some quick math, and as far as gold value is concerned, the extra damage is as good as, or better value than the penetration was. If you want some penetration still, there's an option later on down the line, but it's not something you can easily get with a dip in offense anymore. This is good, I think, as it will actually make non-health defenses more relevant against anyone who isn't building full damage. Speaking of old made new, Executioner has exchanged places with Havoc, becoming a 3-point mastery. The damage buff is the same, but how often it applies scales with points, which I find interesting. I do wonder what the optimal path with this will be. We also get the new Spell Weaving, which I should talk about at the same time as its Tier 4 sister, Blade Weaving. The first buffs spell damage with basic attacks, and the second buffs basic attacks with spells. Together, they create an intricate weave that will work optimally on champions who want to be doing both, like Wukong, and particularly for those who want to use items like Sheen for bonus damage. Tier 4 has another new one in the form of Dangerous Game. It's an interesting, minor snowballing mechanic. I would argue the major purpose is for squishy assassins or nuking mages. Such champions will generally dump most of their spells to kill a target, and this extra health and mana will help to get them out while they're otherwise defenseless. Archmage has been dragged up from Tier 5 and buffed. It gives the same total stats, but in 3 points instead of 4. And now there's Warlord to match it for the attack damage side. Frenzy on Tier 5 has been reworked slightly. It's half as strong as last year on the first strike, but lasts longer and can stack up to 3 times, resulting in an even stronger effect if you crit often enough. Arcane Blade is exactly the same as Spell Sword from last year. The only difference is it's moved down a tier. Still a great option for AP casters that need to weave in auto attacks or need help last hitting. Devastating Strikes is our only option for penetration now, but it gives you both at the same time. This essentially reads as a buff to all non-true damage dealt for a player. And lastly, of course, we have Havoc on Tier 6, back where it was in Season 1 and almost as strong. I don't think I need to explain how strong percent total damage is, do I? Beyond the tweaks and name changes of the other masteries, we can only say that the destruction and lethality masteries have been completely removed. I don't think they'll be missed much. Destruction was generally unnecessary, given the difference with or without it in killing a tower was maybe 1 or 2 shots. Lethality, on the other hand, was just very narrow, and was hard to see the results of sometimes. The defense tree has some interesting changes to it as well. Block, which once was a Tier 4 mastery, has been dragged down and nerfed to match. So, early damage reduction is always handy. Recovery seems to be the return of the good old Vigor mastery, albeit only 2 points deep. It's simple, technically worse than last year's Perseverance at low health, but still good and easier to understand. Plus, when Perseverance was most efficient, generally you'd want to be recalling anyway. Enchanted Armor is last year's Tier 5 called Legendary Armor, except it's even better. Now that 5% bonus only takes 2 points instead of 3. Not always the best choice, but amazing on champions like Rammus or Garen. Lastly here, Tough Skin is exactly the same as last year. Bladed Armor though, which it builds out of, is not. First, it no longer works on minions, which kinda sucks, but now the monsters bleed percent damage, making this stronger early in the fight with a monster and weaker as the fight continues. Not only that, but it will scale up in power with the monsters as the game progresses. What's most important though is that because the damage dealt is based on percent of current health, it's never going to accidentally steal a camp now. With this and the random procs from Wriggles gone, there's no more accidentally stealing camps except through your own faults. Unyielding has been dragged down from Tier 3 and it's been buffed. Sorta. So you only get to have the first point now, but it's twice as strong for melee champions. Pretty sweet. Veteran Scars has also been moved down a tier and nerfed, split into 3 points. In total, you can get more health out of it though, and since there's not much else on Tier 2, you might end up just getting some points in it anyway. Furthermore, it builds into the mighty Juggernaut. Once a Tier 4 3-pointer, it's now a 1-point wonder. It's more powerful than 2 ranks of the old one combined. Mundo Want! Hardiness and resistance are exactly as they were last year, but moved up from Tier 2, in keeping, I suppose, with Riot's role-defining changes. This may have some impact on jungling, as it's more difficult to get armor to clear the jungle with. I suspect the many other changes will make up for it though, as I have yet to see any pros have trouble with the jungle. We also have a new option in the form of Oppression. It's like the old Tier 6 Honor Guard, but only applies under certain circumstances. I don't really know how useful this is, as if an enemy is slowed, snared, stunned, or anything of that nature, they probably won't be dealing much damage unless they're chasing you down, in which case you may have other problems. On Tier 4, we have some old and some new. Last year's Tier 3 Relentless has been moved up, renamed Swiftness, and crushed down into 1 strong point. I might actually touch it now, because beforehand I didn't really want to consider spending 2 points on slow reduction. Last year's Reinforced Armor is exactly as it was before, just pushed down from Tier 5. Evasive is similar to an older mastery called Evasion, but now it only affects magic damage. The viability of this one will depend mostly on your matchups, I think. AoE compositions with Kennen, Malphite, and Orianna work, sure. Misfortune, Garen, and Wukong though, not so much. Perseverance is an old name with new tricks. Health regen based on your missing health is hugely powerful, especially for tanks or health-consuming casters like Mundo, Zac, and Aatrox. This could be awesome. Plus, it builds into the new Second Wind, which makes it even more powerful. This will massively improve the sustain of the champions I just mentioned, stacking on top of Spirit Visage and other effects to make them very hard to kill without straight-up burst damage. Also on Tier 5, we have Legendary Guardian, which is a renamed version of Defender that you can put more than 1 point in. It's slightly weaker versus magic damage, but it scales now, so you can still get more MR from the Mastery than you used to. We also have the new Runic Shield. It might seem strange that it only gives you the shield again on respawning, but it's still quite powerful, especially if you expect to have an early team fight. On a tanky character, which you likely have this far into the tree, that's roughly an extra 10% health in the early game. Finally, at tier 6, we have Tenacious. Last year's Tenacity Mastery has been quashed into a single awesome point. And before you ask, yes, this still stacks multiplicatively with the item ability and other such things. It's still really awesome. As for things removed, we have many more than from the offense tree. Durability is gone, but we still have plenty of health boosts. Old Perseverance, as I said, was unnecessarily complicated, and we have better options now. Safeguard is gone, but frankly you never wanted to be tanking turrets anyway. And Good Hands is finally gone. I've been waiting for it to vanish in Season 1. Planning to die has always been bad, so I'm glad to see the temptation for new players is gone. Honor Guard is also vanishing from our view, which is kinda disappointing. That was a really powerful mastery, but we have a lot of strong options in this new tree, so I'm interested to see how we do without it. The utility tree has a lot of new effects, but it also has a lot of renamed things, or names that have been taken and moved around. For example, the new Phase Walker is just improved recall with a new name and picture. Scout, which was a previous tier 2 mastery, is now a tier 1 with a completely different effect. It's important to note that it works on all trinkets too, which could be quite strong. Meditation is completely unchanged. It works exactly as it has since the Season 1 Masteries. No surprises there. Fleet of Foot is a little more interesting though. It's like last year's Wanderer and Nimble flipped their spaces. You'll get permanent movement speed here, which is always powerful and more useful to people dipping into the tree. Tier 2 has another renaming. Last year's Mastermind is now called Summoner's Insight, which was the name of one of the Summoner Masteries last year, so coming from a past perspective, it could be a little confusing, but as it is, it makes a lot more sense as a relevant name. Strength of Spirit is also old, but has been bumped down from tier 4 and given only 1 point instead of 3. To make up for it, that 1 point is more powerful, with 1 full health regen per 5 for every 300 mana instead of 400. This may seem like a small consolation prize, but we have some other options that might tickle your fancy later. We also have 2 new ones. Conjurer makes all your summons, traps, and clones last longer. 11-minute Teemo Shrooms! More Summon Tibbers! I don't know exactly how powerful this will end up being, but it's certainly an interesting option that will especially help those low mobility casters like Annie and Mordekaiser, among many others. Alchemist makes potions and elixirs stronger. Fancy. Extra health and mana from your potions is always cool. Even more interesting though is Culinary Master, which it grows into. This is our replacement to Biscuiteer. Rather than get a single biscuit when you start the game, it turns all potions you purchase into biscuits, which gives you instant health and mana in addition to the normal health regen. Biscuiteer has been fine this past year, but it's kinda hard to justify a mastery for a consumable item to some new players. This makes more sense and has impact throughout the game. Otherwise, tier 3 is mostly the same. Runic Affinity and Vampirism are unchanged. Greed works the same, but you can only get the first 3 points instead of 4. Not quite as cool, but with all the extra gold from the new items and stuff, I don't feel like that will be quite so necessary. Greed no longer builds into wealth, which is its own separate thing now. It gives almost as much gold as 2 points of wealth used to. Instead, Greed builds into Scavenger, which is exactly what a support wants. Honestly though, I wish this worked a little more like the ancient coin item, giving gold anytime an enemy minion dies near you that you didn't kill. Teamwork is good, but having to rely on your ally to be competent for your own success could cause some frustration. The old expanded mind has been moved from tier 2 and made potentially better. That percent mana bonus is awesome. buy lots of mana, as Rises want to do, and this will be an amazing boost to his power. At tier 4, we also have Inspiration, a replacement for Awareness. Frankly, I'm not going to miss Awareness. Inspiration is a much better mechanic for the support that falls behind. It allows you to catch up in levels even when nowhere near the minions you'd normally have to farm, which is often the problem supports have. They're traveling constantly with their AD carry, who might be farming, might not, don't know. On tier 5, we have another replacement, this time for Pickpocket. But fear not! Bandit works exactly the same for ranged characters. For melee ones, it gives gold on kills and assists instead. While this might not seem like a fair trade, here's how I see it. Melee supports weren't hitting the enemy carry with basic attacks anyway. They would generally just get shot up like crazy all the way there and all the way back. They'd only really get hits in when they'd engage a fight, which is what melee supports are usually great at. So now they get their guaranteed gold when they do their job properly, and it scales better into the late game than the other option. We also have here good old Intelligence, which has been both nerfed and buffed. It now totals only 5% cooldown reduction instead of 6, but in conjunction with Sorcery in the offense tree, it still totals 10%. Plus, it's had the effect of Artificer attached to it, reducing the CDR of items as well. A must-have this far up in the tree. Lastly, on tier 6, we have Wanderer. As I said, it's been flipped from last year, so you get an all-the-time speed at tier 1 and out-of-combat speed now. Since it's an end-of-tree mastery, they can make it much more powerful, and I think it's very appropriate here for the utility tree, as supports will often be roaming out of combat to ward and such. And with all the tweaks and buffs in utility, the only thing actually removed was the Explorer Mastery. I'll miss the free ward, but we'll get plenty of those now through trinkets. All in all, I like our new set of masteries, and I hope you do too. I wish they added a few more options for diversification of builds, but they still look great. So thanks for watching. Join me next time for something completely different, or maybe another one of these for something I missed. If you enjoyed this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. Speak up in the comments below if you have your own take on the changes or some questions. We're all here to learn. Subscribe for future content, including champion guides, gameplay guides, and other possibly not LOL content. Follow me on Twitch for streams, and Twitter and Facebook to see what else is going on. Till next time, I've been Gin, and you've been watching me talk about a video game.